FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Welcome. You are listening to the Financial Survival Network, and I'm Kerry Lutz, and it's time for another Triple Lutz Report, and this is episode number 483. So if you get my newsletter, you already probably read this, but if you don't get my newsletter, you should sign up right now. Go over to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for the newsletter. It's in the upper right-hand corner. Just put your email address in there. There's thousands of you who do get it and thousands of you every week or two who read it when I send it out. So a couple of things. You know that for months, probably 6 months now, I've been telling you that Joe Biden is never going to be the nominee for president. And I still believe that. I think there's going to be a last-minute substitution, kind of like in football, when the quarterback gets injured and they send in a backbencher who has never really thrown a touchdown in his life, certainly not in the NFL, and he goes on to win the game. Well, that would be too Hollywood for what's actually going to happen here. So we need to review what's taken place. So Biden, I could give you clip after clip after clip, if I was into cutting him out, of his bobble-headed nonsense. He's totally vacuous. He has lost it. He is in, I can't say I'm not a doctor, but people who act like him, behave like him, who I've known in the past, are clearly in the throes of dementia. Not the early stages either. They're advanced, and everyone knows this. It's totally a case of the emperor has no cortex, and his cerebral cortex is shot. He can't get out a sentence. I'm not telling you anything you don't already know, but I'm telling you that this was known from the get-go, and that's why he was put up. Now, he doesn't want to go peacefully, and part of the thing is you can't get rid of the presumptive nominee without his consent. So they've thrown all sorts of things at him. Me Too problems, sexual assault, creepy, sleepy Joe Biden. They've got corruption charges, Burisma, his son, Hunter, all these things. They keep throwing and throwing it at him, and he just won't leave. So there was a movie one time with Michael Caine, and it was great. Like, he basically was a up-and-coming executive, and he gets passed over for a promotion, and at that point he decides to kill off the competition, a younger guy who's going to get the job that he so richly deserved. While he's at it, he kills off his wife, and then he kills off his boss because his boss just doesn't know when to leave. I think it was called A Shock to the System, and it was a dark bête noir comedy. And this is Joe Biden here. He just doesn't know when to leave. And they've thrown everything at him, every scandal. I mean, racism, you name it. This guy has been accused of everything. And yet he won't drop out. So something's got to give here. They cannot allow this person to be the nominee because everybody knows that he's good for nothing. And now the Democratic Party, the Bernie bros, won't vote for him. And the other people are starting to say, well, get Cuomo out there. And here's the problem. Here's the problem with Cuomo. And I wrote this article, None Dare Call It Murder. So you know that during the whole pandemic, which is still unfolding, but it's more of a media event than anything else, he's been the hero of the Dems. But, you know, the number of new cases are diminishing. Yes, it's not a straight line up. It's not a straight line down. But clearly the corner has been turned in 2 states which have been most open, Florida and Georgia. Georgia's been 3.5 weeks now, no spike. Florida, there's no spike. It's not going down. It's not going up. In Palm Beach County, where I live, 100 cases a day. That's out of 1.5 million people. oh, but what about the secondary wave and all this? It's not going to happen in the summer. It might happen in the fall and in the winter, but my guess is it's probably not going to. And you've got treatments that are effective to some extent. It appears obvious that combination therapy of hydroxychloroquine, azithromycin, and zinc and multivitamins will save most people. Why they're not doing it, I can't imagine. All because Trump said it might work. Trump has now said he's taking it, and they don't believe him. Morning Joe said he's lying. He's not taking hydroxychloroquine. Look, drug has been on the market for 40 years. Chloroquine's been on the market since 1934. Quinine, they're all quinine syntheses, synthesized quinine with a little bit of a turbocharged kick to it. They can cause heart problems. I've taken Z-Pax, Zithromax many, many times for sinus infections, ear infections, all these things. Never had a heart problem with it yet. Combination of the two, it bears monitoring. But man, look at all those horrible drugs they advertise on television. Big Pharma every single day of the week. It can stop your heart. It can cause you to have a cerebral hemorrhage. It'll cause you to lose the last 3 weeks worth of nutrients and food from both ends. I don't have to go into it. Every drug out there has a risk. Every drug is dangerous. And especially when it's taken off label or taken in quantities or in methods different than the original proof. But nonetheless, off-label prescribing of drugs is common in the medical profession. Originally, hydroxychloroquine was not prescribed for lupus and autoimmune diseases. It evolved over time that it worked. And it's clear to me that there's some efficacy to this thing. I can't say that it's the cure-all, the game changer, etc. I don't really know. But what I do know is it appears in enough studies that weren't double blinds that it appears to be effective in a large number of people if it's given early enough and in the right proportions with zinc and with vitamins, particularly vitamin C. We know this. There's little question, and yet the media doesn't want a cure to the pandemic. They want a Bill Gates sponsored, owned vaccine. And why that is, you can go speculate, but I don't trust the deep state. I sure don't trust Bill Gates. He's the progenitor, he's the successor, rather, of a line of eugenicists. So let's forget about vaccines. Now, the idea that we can't open up until everybody is cured of this dreadful disease is absurd. All right. So far, 90 some odd thousand deaths. Dr. Birx, by her own admission, says it's 25% overstated. If she's admitting to 25, it's way higher than that. Why is it overstated? A, for political purposes. B, because hospitals get rewarded for every death certificate, person dying in the hospital, and cause of death being written in COVID-19. And if they're put on a ventilator, I think they get $13,000 for just a cause of death. But on the ventilator, if they were on a ventilator, the hospital gets $39,000. So you've given them a direct incentive to fudge these numbers. And in addition, the CDC is sending out guidelines, the state health departments. When in doubt, it's COVID-19, plain and simple. But let's just assume it's 90,000 and it's going to go up to 120 or 30. All right. Terrible. It's a tragedy. It's about 3-4 years worth of traffic deaths in the U.S. All these other causes of death, stroke, heart attack, etc., seem to have greatly diminished. Now, in most states, it's not even a statistical blip. But in states like New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, Michigan, Louisiana, there's enough deaths there that it's actually increased the number of deaths in about 6 or 7 states. But my guess is what will happen is that the number of deaths will equalize over time. In some states, 40, 50, 60, 80% of the people dying, like Pennsylvania, Michigan, others, are in senior care facilities. So when we look at the senior care facilities, a lot of these people in frail condition, And this speeded up their departure, sadly so, because everybody is owed a duty of care by the people taking care of them to see that their lives last for as long as possible, provided they're willing for them to last that long. And clearly, these governments, these governors have totally failed. So getting to the point, in New York, I wrote an article, None Dare Call It Murder. So New York Penal Code Section 125 defines homicide as conduct which causes the death of a person. And then we have what's called criminally negligent homicide. That's in Section 15.10. And a person is guilty of criminally negligent homicide when, with criminal negligence, he causes the death of another person. So, and criminal negligence is defined in New York Penal Code Section 15.05, culpability definitions of culpable mental states. And paragraph 4 there is the relevant paragraph. Criminal negligence. A person acts with criminal negligence with respect to a result or to a circumstance described by a statute defining an offense when he fails to perceive a substantial and unjustifiable risk that such result will occur or that such circumstance exists. The risk must be of such nature and degree that the failure to perceive it constitutes a gross deviation from the standard of care that a reasonable person would observe in the same situation. So here's the truth. The truth has come out. At least 1,700 plus of New York State's most vulnerable citizens have died as a direct result of Governor Andrew Cuomo's state health department's edict that nursing homes are prohibited from requiring a hospitalized resident who is determined medically stable to be tested for COVID-19 prior to admission or readmission. So what does that mean? It means that you can't even ask if the person had COVID-19, if the infection's still active, if they're still communicable, if they're still contagious. You're not allowed to ask that. That is sickness. That is a depravity towards life that I in my life never believed the government was possible, that they could ever do this, that the government was capable of. Yet here we are.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next.
Silver One Resources is an exploration and development company backed by strategic investors Eric Sprott and SSR Mining. At Silver One's Candelaria Mine project in Nevada, there is already a historic resource estimated at 127 million ounces of silver, which Silver One is developing and advancing. The company's Phoenix Silver project, located within the Arizona Silver Belt, is an early-stage exploration project on which native silver vein fragments have been discovered near surface. One grab sample assayed an astounding 14,688 ounces per ton. Yes, that's right, ounces, not grams. Silver One has tremendous exploration potential, is extremely leveraged to the price of silver, and is cashed up and poised to increase shareholder value. Silver One trades in New York under the ticker SLVRF and in Toronto under the ticker SVE. To learn more, go to silverone.com. That's silverone.com.
The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Since the pandemic began, and it began in Washington State in a senior home, it's general knowledge that elderly people with additional comorbidities such as diabetes, high blood pressure, obesity, a number of other maladies, compromised immune systems and such, they are extremely susceptible to COVID-19. And they had much higher death rates in places like China, Italy, and Spain. And other countries that preceded the U.S. outbreak have further substantiated this fact. Nursing home residents are most likely to possess or have multiple comorbidities. So like I said, the first major U.S. outbreak occurred at the Life Care Center in Kirkland, Washington at the end of February. And some 37 elderly people died as a result. At that time, senior care facilities were declared to be on the front lines of the pandemic. But evidently, Messrs. Cuomo and his commissioner, Zucker, who also happens to be a lawyer, they never heard about this, evidently. So to deliberately ship actively infected COVID-19 patients to nursing homes in New York, and its other states too, which we'll talk about later, senior care and assisted living facilities, is just nothing short of a death sentence to these hapless residents. And over the years, we've seen numerous nursing home scandals in New York State. There was a guy, and they exposed dreadful conditions present there. In the New York law, the state often pays for a person's nursing home stay through Medicaid. And most New Yorkers weren't alive or have forgotten these notorious chambers of horrors that were masterminded by nursing home exploiter Bernard Bergman. But some of us are still around, and some of us still do. These horrible operators still exist and are an outgrowth of New York's insane Medicaid program, which, like I said, pays the cost of many nursing home residents. So Governor Cuomo and Commissioner Zucker, you got some splaining to do here. Are you guilty of criminally negligent homicide? A look at the statute above. Let's talk about it again. A person is guilty of criminally negligent homicide when, with criminal negligence, he causes the death of another person. So again, what is criminal negligence? Well, you look at the statute again, and it's defined when he fails to perceive a substantial and unjustifiable risk that such result will occur or that such circumstance exists. The risk must be of such nature and degree that the failure to perceive it constitutes a gross deviation from the reasonable person standard. Suffice it to say. So it seems obvious. Cuomo and his appointee, Howard A. Zucker, MD, JD, he was just admitted in 2019, but I guess when they taught law in law school, he wasn't there that day. But they both failed to perceive, or more probably ignored, the risk that would occur by dumping COVID-19 infected patients into nursing homes. No person who watched a newscast in the past 3 months could be oblivious to the deaths that were certain to occur. Nobody, not me, not you, any of you watching, you had to know. And they had to know. And it is also clear that the nature and degree of that failure to perceive it constitutes a gross deviation from that reasonable person. I mean, I wouldn't send them there. And we'll talk about other people who didn't. Now, many would argue that Governor Cuomo is clearly an unreasonable person, but not in the context of the law. Maybe he is. The reasonable man is one whose actions are considered reasonable under the circumstances. So giving Cuomo and Zucker as much leeway as possible and understanding that this truly was an unprecedented emergency in our nation and in New York State, was it reasonable for them to issue this edict? Many beds in COVID-19 provisional or field hospital facilities went unused. The naval ship, the Comfort, served very few patients during the crisis. Same for the field hospitals in Central Park and in the Javits Center. And they, by the way, they cost tens of millions, hundreds of millions to construct. In addition, I know this from one of our FSN community members, upstate New York hospitals were empty because they weren't allowed to accept normal elective patients. An elective could be having a mammogram or a biopsy or anything else. They were strictly shut down to accept COVID-19 patients. In the early stages of the crisis, none of them were sent up there. And if they could build hospitals, they could use helicopters to ferry these people up there. So Cuomo, Commissioner Zucker, you must immediately account for your actions. Perhaps you do have a reasonable explanation. I can't imagine what, but maybe you do. But whatever your rationale, lives have been lost as a result of your actions, and you need to be held accountable. And unfortunately, the very same thing happened in multiple states, including Michigan, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Massachusetts, California, but we'll give them some credit because upon realizing the consequences of what they were doing, they rapidly discontinued the practices. We will refrain from any political observations here. Other governors in other states did not do this. And in fact, they went out of their way to protect these helpless elderly people who are literally at the mercy of the likes of Cuomo and Zucker. So look, federal rules also govern nursing home containment of infectious diseases. And there's a section on preventing infections which mandates that the facility must isolate residents when the infection control program determines it is needed to prevent the spread of infections. Quoting from the regulations here, that the facility must prohibit employees with communicable diseases from direct contact with residents or their food if direct contact will transmit the disease. So the state's mandatory admission edicts forced nursing homes, particularly in New York, to completely ignore these safeguards. And then the New York state legislature immunized them against lawsuits for this. But they didn't immunize Cuomo or Commissioner Zucker. They need to be held accountable. Compelling nursing homes to accept COVID-19 patients without proper personal protection equipment and training and disease mitigation steps was truly a death sentence to thousands of elderly New Yorkers and around the country. And it's not just the 1,700. There's a lot more. They have been covered up. We know this. Medical examiners have exposed it to some extent. We know these people really did something horrible. If this isn't a gross violation of the residents' constitutional rights, then clearly that document has lost all of its impact and importance in our world. And where is the Department of Justice and the FBI, who should be investigating this travesty now? They need to get to the bottom of it immediately, please. Finally, in Pennsylvania, trans woman Secretary of Health, Dr. Rachel Levine, removed her mother from a personal care home, slightly different than a nursing home, after ordering nursing homes to accept COVID patients. She didn't order personal care homes to do it. Someone else did, but clearly she's involved in it. Clearly, this is an indication that the good doctor understood the risks of what she was doing and the vulnerability of the people she was supposed to be protecting. It's no coincidence that the overwhelming majority of deaths in Pennsylvania, at least 2,400, took place in elder care facilities. If this doesn't warrant an FBI probe, then what does? These people need justice. We need justice. Getting back to the COVID-19 epidemic, pandemic, take your pick. It was serious, especially for the people with comorbidities. In one study, 7,000 deaths were studied in New York, and 99.2% of these people who died had underlying comorbidities. So yes, it's dangerous. But to the rest of us, the 99.85% of the population who wasn't at risk of COVID-19, this was a travesty. Maybe it wasn't 99. It's probably about 80% got COVID-19, never had any symptoms, in the high 80s perhaps. So that 15%, the ones that needed to be protected, but your odds of getting it if you didn't fall into a comorbidity class. And comorbidities, untreated high blood pressure, untreated diabetes, uncontrolled. So if you didn't fall into that category, your odds were, like, depending upon your age, anywhere from virtually no chance to around 1/3% for people like me. 1/3%, it's a risk I'm willing to take because the odds of me getting killed on I-95 in Florida greatly exceed any of my chances of getting COVID-19. I got tested for antibodies last week. I was hoping I had them so I wouldn't have to worry about it anymore. Fortunately, unfortunately, I didn't have it. So that's good. Maybe I'm immune. A certain portion of the population is probably immune. So to shut down the global economy, to cost the United States trillions of dollars it doesn't have, and the global economy as well, and whatever the Chinese motivation was for unfurling or releasing this blight upon humanity, we can deal with that later. something has got to be done here because our response to this has been insane, totally insane. Now, I'm willing to accept that masks might stop the spread, but every piece of advice that CDC, that Dr. Fauci gave out, it turned out to be incorrect. First, they said no, very little chance of person-to-person communicable, transmission of the disease. Turned out to be wrong. First, it was 2.2 million people were going to die. Now it's probably 150,000, probably chop half of that off. But most of them are people who were probably not long for this world anyway. And that doesn't minimize it because they're entitled to live the best life that you possibly can, even if you are ill. But the fact is, to shut down the world economy and the amount of deaths and horrible things that are going to happen, I don't need to go into them. You know it. The number of people who have diseases, cancers, untreated for 2-3 months, who won't be able to be saved, who could have been otherwise. This is truly a humanitarian crisis. And then to just go after treatments that appear to work because President Trump appeared to endorse them, that is not medicine. That's not science. It's not even politics. It's propaganda. It's pure evil. Anyways, that's it for now. Hey, love to hear from you. Tell us your thoughts on these subjects. They're really important, really, really important. I want to hear from you. Remember, financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Sign up for a free newsletter. And the Twitter feed is @Kerry Lutz. The Facebook page is Financial Survival Network. And we really want to hear from you. Go over to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for a free newsletter. Send me an email, kl@kerrylutz.com, kl@kerrylutz.com. It's been another Triple Lutz Report. Kerry Lutz signing off.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.